Good morning or good afternoon or God knows what, everyone. Today our presentation's on Composable Roadmap, future-proofing your DXP.
And I am Kamruz Jaman. I'm a Sitecore MVP for the past 11 years, and I've been in the content management space since around 2009 or so.
And my name is Akshay Surya. I've been doing this for way too long, but I'm a Sitecore MVP as well as a Content.ai MVP. So we have a long list of things to go through, so we're going to try to get through it because there's quite a bit of content out there.
Yeah, so just a little bit about us and our Composable story. We've been working with Composable DXP projects for the past 5 years or so, and we've tried to be thought leaders in this space and share a lot of our knowledge, a lot of our experiences, and a lot of our learning as we've gone along. We have primarily had been working in the kind of traditional CMS headspace space, and in the past few years we've probably migrated over 30 actually now, over 30 websites from the traditional monolithic CMSs to headless and composable stacks. Within our team here at Konabos, we have over 10 Sitecore MVPs, and as I actually mentioned, he is also a Content.ai MVP.
Yeah, and we typically work with huge orgs with multiple brands, focus on pharma, manufacturing, health, and communities.
So before we get started, just a little bit of an intro. So what is when we talk about monolith and when we talk about composable, what are we talking about? So the traditional DXP, digital experience platform, would be an all-in-one system. You buy a system from a vendor and it provides you all of the functionality. So that's all of the content, all of the presentation layer, all the orchestration layer in between. It may include analytics, search, personalization, maybe even some commerce. It potentially is cloud, but usually it's traditionally on-prem or self-hosted within your own cloud structure. And you have to use all of this essentially, right? It's all baked in, it's all tightly integrated, and it all works together. Whereas with Composable DXP, you are picking and choosing the elements that you require for your organization, for your customer at that moment in time. So you can pick a vendor for the content part of it. You can pick another vendor for the personalization part, yet another vendor for the analytics. And then you can have a DIY custom solution for the orchestration, or there's a number of products that you can also buy for the orchestration and the presentation as well. So it's future-proofing your stack by picking and choosing the best of breed solutions for your organization at that moment in time.
So today we wanted to actually talk about an actual customer who we can name, but they're going through this process as we speak. So this giant manufacturing company deals with mechanical equipment all around the world. And they were in this realm of a monolithic DXP, and now they're figuring out, is this the right time? What is the right time? Should we look at different options? And there were a few which were really, few pain points which were really driving their decisions to look. And one of the major ones was upgrade. So every time they go for an upgrade, it's a huge unit of work, takes a long time, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of resources in order to get there. So they aren't happy with that. Every time a new brand comes along, so this company has about 26 brands. They were just acquired, so I don't know how many more they have. Every time they want to onboard a new brand, it was taking longer. The commerce piece was taking longer than the content piece, and they were just not happy. They felt like it needed to be a little bit smoother than it is. And every time they either want to staff up internally or look externally, finding these specific resources which would be implementing on this traditional DXP was a little bit difficult because it is specialized and everything you need to know pretty well in order to do it. They were tired of the infrastructure costs. So this specific customer is on Azure, and the costs are greater, right? So as you're adding more sites, the infrastructure cost per month running cost was pretty high, along with the licensing costs in terms of just to maintain it. And then the deployment process itself was too difficult. So one of their pain points is it took too long. If we wanted to go to production, it wasn't instantaneous. It would take like 30 to 40 minutes to get to one environment to another environment. And then sometimes to get UAT done and get to the next step, it took even longer. And they were not happy with this complicated deployment process. So what were they looking for, right? And they're actually in the middle of this process that we're going to go through with you guys. And just to know that we have a few other customers on different paths of this journey. One already finished a couple of years ago, and we're continuing to work with them on it. They're not looking for anything which can't be achieved. And that's the funniest part about all of this is they wanted to turn on a dime. So any brand they bring on, they wanted it to be a 3 to 4 week engagement where a new brand comes in. If the data and the content is ready, it should be pretty easy to get it up and get it to the new site on the new platform. Should be the case. They wanted easy integration with all their services, whether they are existing, older, newer. They just didn't want to write custom implementations for all of these. The page load speeds was something of concern. So last year or so, when Google started focusing more on if your page loads faster, then you get a higher ranking automatically. Some of these services, whether you put CDNs in front of it, it's still not as fast as you would want it to be. And their business is very commerce oriented, and that's something they truly care for, is a better search engine ranking when people are organically searching for things. Lower infrastructure costs, and then just being able to deploy faster. So one of the things that we kind of talk to them about is we use whatever we've done already on this platform, or the platform we built for the customer. Is the last time I've actually looked at a server or something downtime. We were just having this conversation with the other customer recently. In the past 3 years since we launched 16 sites for that one customer, there's 0 downtime. It's 100% uptime according to the metrics. So that's something that they want. And then they want to be able to use their content in multiple ways. So based on our previous experience where we're using content from a headless CMS on a kiosk, as well as a mobile phone, as well as on the websites, that's something they want to do. They just feel a little bit restricted on the current system they're on. So what do we start with? So it's funny, like right before we jumped on the call, we were having the conversation with Matt, and one of the customers who we just proposed something to was sharing some information where we were one of 5 people who put out a proposal, and we were the only ones who were different. And the difference is all the other 4 proposals say, yep, we can get started tomorrow. We'll get it done in 90 days. We'll have it up and running. We don't take that approach because we don't know what we're building, to be quite honest, because we want to find out your business problems. And that's where I think it's a little bit different. We look at it from a business problem. We don't look at it as a technology issue. So we start with the road mapping. Road mapping simply means that we sit with your teams, look at how your current process works. We look at your architecture, the pain points, the online, offline touch points of the business, whether someone gets an email, they take the product image, and someone has to load it into OneDrive, and someone picks it up from OneDrive, pushes it to the DAM, things like that. Trying to stay very technology agnostic and not to say, okay, we are taking out a CMS, let's put a CMS in. That isn't what we're looking for. We don't even know what we're looking for in terms of technology until we really get to know the business problems, or what's causing issues with the business overall in terms of anything related to the product or the website or your operations. Once we identify that, that's when we try to figure out, okay, now that we know all of it, there are a few pieces in your puzzle where you're already using Google Analytics, for instance, or you already have a product information management system. There's no reason to go get something new. We could reuse those. Let's figure out what exactly do we need. In some cases, you don't even need to get anything new. You already have all the pieces of the puzzle, so you probably need to get 1 or 2 pieces. But it saves a lot of heartache and headache and it definitely streamlines things to let people who do their things do better. So for instance, anyone who manages digital assets, and in our case, we see that this customer has quite a lot of print-based, 3D-based renderings, web assets, all kinds of assets, and they're all maintained in the DAM already, but the website isn't really using the power of the DAM, and that's an easy thing to pinpoint when you see duplication of effort. So that's a big one to call out.
And then I think that one of the most important things is the architecture, right? So we start with, we said business-driven architecture, but why is that architecture important? Well, if you're going to build your dream home, you don't just call in the contractors, right? You don't just call in somebody to come start digging some foundations, and you don't then call in somebody to come start laying some bricks. You call in an architect, you talk with the architect, you discuss with the architect, you tell them what are your needs, what are your requirements, what would you like, what is your vision for the future, and you also want to plan for that future, right? You're not just building your house for the today and the now. You're building this house for your future dreams, for your future aspirations. So I think the architecture is extremely important, and it's important to get that right at this time. And you're not just buying a monolith, right? You're not just buying that traditional all-in-one platform, whether you need these things or you don't need these things, and then you're then trying to fit your processes around that platform. Getting that architecture is extremely important. And I think we've seen time and time, and again, with a lot of those traditional monoliths, that people buy these monoliths with the, from the sales pitch, they know, oh, it can do this for me, it can do that for me. And they never end up using them anyway, right? And then you just have a huge system that you're maintaining, but you're not taking advantage of, and you get all the pain and all the headache from it, with all of those trade-offs. So yeah, I think we really have to, you really do have to look at your current systems. You really do have to look at what you're actually using, and as part of that roadmap and as part of that architecture.
And you just have to approach it a little bit differently. So it does take you to look at things a little bit differently in terms of when you look at your current platform and you look at what the processes are. So like one of the examples we always tend to go towards is Google Analytics. A lot of these DXPs have their own analytics. But what we've noticed with these organizations is they have a specific group of people who take care of the analytics, Google Tag Manager, the reporting going up to various departments is already preset. So there's no point in looking for a different solution and having a secondary solution for analytics. That's a really good example. The other one, which we find quite often, is if you use something like a Marketo to manage your CRM email activities. Marketo already provides you the ability to have these forms which you want to put on the website, but yet we see a lot of duplication when we get into these situations. We're like, oh, why don't you just use Marketo and build these forms? It goes straight to your CRM. The processes stay the same. So, from our perspective, we look at the composable world as something where you can reuse things if you already have it. And I bet you your environments already have things set in place that work really well. The staff really love them. There's no point in finding or duplicating that effort. It just has to be looked at it just a little bit differently.
I think the classic one on that one for us as well, especially those manufacturing clients, was the DAM, right? They would have they'd have a DAM for their internal processes because they had to create a bunch of brochures and
catalogs and things,
and things like that. And so what they do is they have all that in place, in process, and then they download those images and upload it into their CMS and then reattach it. And there's just duplication, and then it gets updated in the DAM, but somebody forgets to update it in the CMS because these are now two disconnected systems. So there was quite a lot of process duplication in things like this.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things we always call out is it will be a change in business process. What do I mean by that? So based on our experience, right? So one of these customers, which we always use the example for, is at first we needed to provide a out-of-the-box thinking to the board. This I'm talking about 4 years ago when this wasn't as predominant in terms of composable solutions. And when we proposed the solution to the board, they brought in everyone from the person who was uploading images all the way to the top and everything in between. They understood that we were trying to figure out a process which will make their lives better. At first, obviously education is quite a big thing because there were questions. How does this affect me? How does my daily work change? How does the process change? What do I have to do now? What is composable? What is Jamstack? Things like that. So the education process was continuous throughout the entire implementation, from bottom up, top down, everything. But from a business process change, because we had the buy-in, it was pretty easy for us to architect it in a way where now we are saying, okay, you know what, XYZ, you and your team own the digital asset management system. You already take care of high-end assets for 3D renderings, 360 videos, brochures, all that fun stuff. Let us come up with a way of storing web assets, mobile assets, so that we can reuse them elsewhere. And it was really easy for us to get that buy-in. And once that's done, it's the alignment of the rest of the team. So the mobile team, the web team, the marketing team, all work in conjunction with, okay, if we need something in the DAM, we need to coordinate with this team. And it actually became a lot less duplicitous, because now we are not storing it one copy in the web, one copy here, one copy there. It was in one central place. But it's super duper important to have education all across all the teams involved, as well as everyone's buying to figure out we're doing this for a purpose, and the purpose is to make sure that everything is streamlined and we know what we're doing, and we're doing it for a specific reason. You're on mute, Composable.
Yeah. So when we're comparing our traditional DXPs and the composable, just take a look at what we mean with that as well. So your traditional DXPs would include your traditional content management systems or web content management systems, your all-in-one digital platforms that would, as I mentioned earlier, would encompass everything. It would provide all of the features. These features usually are very, very powerful. They provide a lot of flexibility to you as well. But with that power and with that flexibility does come a lot of complexity as well. These are typically self-hosted, and these systems have become, as they become more complex, hosting them has become equally more complex and more cumbersome. There's a lot of different services doing a lot of different things. And you are responsible for the entire platform at that point, right? So you have to deal with all the hosting, or the upgrades, any scaling, all the security issues, any patches, all the deployments, and any other custom functionality that you want to deal with as well. These are very much different than what we would think about when we talk about composable. So is composable for everyone? I'm going to just come out straight off the bat and say no, it's not, right? Those traditional platforms are going to stay around for a while, and it meets the needs of certain customers and certain requirements, whereas composable is going to meet a different requirement for a different set of customers who have different pain points. So traditional platforms are going to be good for those businesses that require to be self-hosting, or maybe your composable system actually is not available in a specific region. We've come across certain customers who have a very specific need to host in a very specific country or very specific set of data centers, and not all composable systems are able to meet that requirement. Not everyone has a requirement for scaling, or it's not a priority, at least, because they're not a global multinational. They don't get high amounts of traffic. Just a small system is fine for them, and maybe they only have a single team that actually handles everything. And they just want to keep that smaller footprint as a result. Some people do just want that single integrated tool that does everything end to end. They don't want to deal with multiple different systems. and maybe you don't have any business processes in place at the moment that, and so your business is actually willing to fit to the system rather than having the system fit to your requirements. And then you can kind of just grow into that system because you're not entirely sure what your path is, for example. And maybe just you have a traditional platform and you're just happy with the choice. Everyone is happy using it. It's been implemented well. You don't have issues with the scaling and everything else, and you're happy to deal with the upgrades as and when they come. It's a perfectly valid choice. If you're happy with it, then why change something? The composable systems, though, if you need a highly scalable and global solution, this is something to think about. It will remove the overhead of hosting this system and the upgrades that go with that. Composable systems typically are also rapidly iterating and providing new features, and they just appear. Like you'll wake up and say, we've just reskinned the system, we've just made it easier, it's just faster, we've introduced some new functionalities, some new data types, etc. If you already have an existing marketing stack within your organization and you want to actually integrate that marketing stack with a composable system, then this is a great solution. This is a great way to tackle that problem rather than trying to integrate it with the all-in-one systems, which are not designed to be that integrated in that kind of way. And some of these maybe these existing systems are best of breed tools, and you're using these to solve different business needs for different parts of the business. One of the other great advantages of a composable solution is it gives you a lot of freedom from technology and vendor lock. What I mean with technology is the languages that you decide to use, your hosting options, the vendors, both from the different stacks. So you can have a different CMS vendor, you can have a different analytics vendor, you can have a different commerce vendor, but also from the agency side as well. So because this technology is so open, you can find a lot of other partners and agencies to actually help you with the implementation. Whereas with some of the all-in-one platforms, it's a very niche set of skill sets, so you're kind of limited in the choice of the partners that you have available to work with you on this.
Yeah, it keeps everyone honest with the implementation partners as well as the software vendors, right? So yeah, it's a win-win.
So there are a lot of advantages to using a composable DXP stack. Actually, I mentioned some of these earlier, but the omni-channel nature of the solutions and the headless first nature mean that the content can be curated and reused in multiple different channels, whether that's web, mobile, TV, fridge, washing machine, whatever. The kiosk is one that we recently launched for a customer. They do have an API first approach, which is really, really nice. It's extremely open and a very simple approach, and it's a consistent approach across different services. So if you just your CMS, your commerce systems, your analytics instance, they all follow this API approach. And once you learn one system, it's actually quite easy to jump across and integrate and learn the other systems as well. They all follow a microservices approach and are all usually SaaS by default. We have been seeing some vendors that also allow on-prem installations for some of their headless systems, and that can be part of your composable stack. And again, if that's a requirement for regulatory or specific country specific requirements, then again, that's a good option. Mentioned is technology agnostic. You're just working against APIs, so you can use whatever technology you like to integrate and work with those systems. A lot of vendors do provide SDKs, so typically you probably want to start looking at those technology sets, usually around React or .NET Core, but you can use whatever you like. Typically, these composable systems are best of breed. They do one thing extremely well, and that's the one thing they focus on, and it all should then hopefully meet your specific requirement, you have the option to pick any number of vendors to meets your specific requirement. Mentioned the vendor lock, but these solutions do also provide rapid response to business needs. So if you need to, the composable approach allows you to add different systems when you need them. So as your business changes, you can start to add in those different requirements rather than those traditional CMSs, which are either already locked in the functionality they provide, or if you want to change something, you have to kind of completely build it custom and make a lot of customizations, which leads to a lot of other problems down the road with upgrades and things like that.
And one thing to add is when we say best of breed, we don't mean what Gartner tells you is in the part of the Magic Quadrant. What we are saying is best of breed is what's best of breed for you and your situation. So when you're evaluating a piece of technology, so a headless CMS or a headless commerce, you look at it to see what fits your business needs, not the other way around. So that might be second, third, for whatever the rating is in terms of Gartner and Forrester, but we don't mean best of breed as in pick the top one from whatever the ratings you go by and your procurement team tells you. It's based on needs. One thing.
Yeah, we always do say try to say best of need, right?
Yes.
So whatever fits your needs in that moment in time and your future requirements.
Yeah, and the other thing Cameron's touched on, which I'm going to mention really quick, is we keep saying vendor lock and as well as implementation partner lock, right? Right. It'll avoid the reasoning for this. And part of it, Cameron had mentioned, is because of the way you pull information out of these systems is so standard across everyone who is in the same industry. So all headless CMSs are pretty similar when you're pulling data out, or you could pull it out in a similar way. It just becomes easier when you want to transfer it to another vendor or you want to transfer it to another implementation partner.
So there are some disadvantages as well to using the composable DXP approach. It's not specific to web, and I know, and as I mentioned in the previous slide, that omnichannel was an advantage, but not everybody has a requirement to go beyond the web. Maybe you're just web first, and having responsive websites is enough for you. Maybe you don't have any apps or need to push it to your kiosk or something like that. The omnichannel will not necessarily be an advantage, and it's a slightly different way of working as well when you move to these types of systems. There are a lot of different systems available and a lot of different vendors. I did mention before that not everybody cares for that. Sometimes you can fit your business needs to the product, and having the multiple systems and the multiple vendors can be a bit overwhelming and can lead to a bit of choice paralysis. You just don't know what to do. Definitely just don't just go to the Gartner and go to that top corner. Make sure you do your own mapping and make sure that the systems actually meet your needs. None of these systems will provide any real functionality out of the box. Like the CMS is just a CMS. You're not going to get a click website. Some of them will provide like starter kits and examples and things like that. You also have to DIY some dashboards and controls together. And what I mean by that is, because you now end up with multiple different systems, like you won't end up with one for the CMS, maybe you end up with another for the commerce and another for your personalization engine. You'll have 3 different systems or 4 different systems or 5 different systems. Whereas with the monolith, it'll just be, I log in and then everything is there on my dashboard. I click each button and it will take me to that, part of that functionality. You're not getting that with the composable. So you can just DIY yourself a dashboard together, a launch control if you like, and your content authors and your users can use that as the launchpad essentially. A lot of these DXPs also lack visual editors. So what we are used to with some of those monoliths is because they control both the content and the presentation that goes with it. We're used to these WYSIWYG editors, and you can just go in and add components to a page and update the content and that kind of thing. because of the omni-channel nature and the API-driven nature, there is a lack of visual editors. I know there are some products available that fill this gap, and there is a series of webinars that is actually happening. I think first one's in June the 7th, right? Actually,
Yeah,
I'll post
the
a link.
community.
Yeah, for the DX community. I'll post a link in the chat for those that are interested in that. I think it's going to be a really, really great series. So there is a lack of visual editors, but there are also products available that are really starting to fill this gap.
Oh, now we come to the meat. So this is a question which we get asked quite a bit in terms of, how hard is it, or how complicated is migrating from what we currently have. And it is kind of like a very easy answer, which is it's complicated, or it depends, right? And it truly does. Migration really has a lot of aspects to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of different parts to this, right? So I'm going to try and cover a few areas. It is huge. We could probably spend a few days on this, but so the migration. I think to start with, we talked a lot about road mapping. We really, really do believe that this is the best place to start when you're looking at your composable DXP stack and not at specific products and specific things to solve unknown problems, or what you think are your problems. Really is the road mapping part of it. But to start with evaluating your current monolithic DXP, conduct a thorough assessment and identify its strengths, weaknesses, and limitations, right? Understand what your specific pain points and areas are, and what exactly are you hoping that a composable DXP will bring. Where do you think that flexibility and scalability is going to help? Then you have to define your goals and requirements clearly, and expectations for this migration. Trying to identify the specific features and functionalities and business requirements that you want to achieve. And this is then going to help you make a more informed decision during the migration process. And when I talk about features and functionality, I'm not talking about like this of your website, for example, or your mobile app. I'm talking about holistic kind of areas and modules, like, is it the content management system? Is it the personalization engine? Is it the commerce side of the business? Is it the DAM? Is it the PIM? So these should all be coming out as a result of your road mapping sessions, and you can then start to figure out where those integrations are going to come, and where the current pain points are with those integrations. When you explore the different composable DXP solutions available in the market, try to make use of the trials that they have available. Try to make use of don't just go off the sales pitches, make use of the trials, make small little systems, proof of value systems. Does it meet your needs? Is it fitting your requirements? Is it easy to work with? Does it gel with your team? There's no point in buying a system that your team hates. And obviously evaluate each of the platforms against the goals and the requirements that you defined earlier. Planning the migration strategy is going to be another one of these it depends systems, right? Because we don't know right now off the top of in this particular case, we don't know what your current solution is, what your current systems are, but be sure to develop a very detailed migration plan, define the scope, the timelines, what resources you're going to require, and then break down that migration process into manageable phases and iterations. There's also lots of different migration strategies. Are you going to be taking a big bang approach where you're going to migrate all of the systems and all of your websites in one go? Are you going to be doing parts of the system, parts of the websites? Maybe it's some microsites that are going to be migrating first. And then identify those modular components within your system. So with the Composable DXP, there's going to be lots of different modules and components of your system. So again, the CMS, the commerce, the PIM, the DAM. Break those down, see how much you can decouple those, and start to plan out the relationships and the dependencies between these modules. Which one of these modules can you migrate in the background without affecting your current functionality and get those ready for the composable stack? Which one of those are going to have to be done as a larger and slightly more integrated part of your program? And then you're going to have to design a bunch of APIs. So with a traditional monolith, you typically build all of the functionality within the framework of the monolith, and you'll then deploy that as a whole to a single platform, a single release. With the Composable, you're breaking this down. You're breaking this down into smaller systems, into more manageable systems, into more scalable systems, into little microservices, essentially. So you're going to have to. And this may be something as simple as an API for the search results, or an API that you're actually submitting the some form submissions into. So break down those APIs and start to build those into these little microservices, and make sure you're using well-documented and industry standards, because that's also going to help with the integration with all the systems that you're going to be bringing in as part of your Composable DXP. And it's important to continue to iterate and evolve. Composable DXPs are designed for agility and flexibility. Embrace this iterative approach, and then continue just refining as you go along. As you start to implement, you'll learn new things about your business, you'll learn new things about your teams, you'll learn new things about how Composable DXPs work and how best your teams can work with them. And then obviously just continue to look at new products, new offerings, new services that can help your business, and as you need them, bring on different systems.
Right. In the interest in time, we're probably gonna speed up just a little bit. But migration strategy, right? It truly depends. So most of the time, what we find is the source as well as the destination both have pretty good ways of exchanging data. So it depends on if you're doing a full rewrite, or if you're just are you taking it as is, or you're planning on doing more as in UI UX work on top of that to move. So it all depends on that. But a good amount of it could be automated depending on what you're planning to do. And that's what we ended up doing in a couple of our projects.
Yep, and I mentioned migration strategy. So you're just doing everything at one go, or parts of the site, part systems, make use of those developer trials, and then crawl, walk, run. Right, start small and then build up, and embrace that Composable DXP philosophy.
Ooh, alternatives. So one of the first questions we get is, well, this includes this, right? I'm like, no. So from a composable perspective, you have to think about how, if you're moving away from a traditional or a monolith DXP, you are going to have to find replacements, either replacements of things you already have, or maybe something you need to get. So one such question we get is analytics. What do I do about my analytics? So what do you do right now? Most of the time, the answer we hear is they're already using a specific provider for analytics on top of what they do on the traditional DXP. Here are a few examples. Recently, I found more of these depending, I believe if you're in health space, there's a couple which do quite a bit of HIPAA-based storage, but there are several options. Google Analytics being the de facto because it's free. But there's also a couple of other options here which kind of give you a little bit more functionality on top of the analytics that you use. The other question we get is about forms. And this is an interesting question, actually. We got one yesterday from one of our healthcare customers where they want to move over and they want to do it in a hurry. And they like, what happens for, HIPAA-based information gathering? And our answers are basically exactly the same. Do you already have something in your ecosystem that consumes this data? And does that system have the capability of giving you a way to embed forms or being able to interact and pass information? What we typically find is, yes, there's already something in place like a Market or a HubSpot where you're able to directly transmit the information to that system, follow all the GDPR, CCPA, any of the privacy laws that apply to your audience, and interact with forms that way. That's the easiest way to get in. The other question we get is, how do I replace search? So typically traditional DXPs come with a specific search engine they use by default, and you end up using the same to get an okay experience, I guess. And some companies do add other third-party vendors on top of it to enhance the search experience. What we found is, again, from a composable space, is that you are going to need a search provider to store information from different places, provide it to your customers the right way. Here are a few. I mean, we've worked with pretty much everyone on this slide, but you do have many options depending on the volume you do, the type of search you want to provide, the customizations you want to do, how personalized you want the search to be, and several other factors. But these are some really good players in the market in the composable space. This is a big question. So personalization and CDP gets used quite a bit. And honestly, there's quite a bit more that we could put on this slide. Valid question, again, in the composable space, pretty much every traditional DXP has their own personalization engine. They're actually pretty good at what they do. Most of the time, for me, the one thing I normally say is personalization is its own project. It needs to run along while you're doing development, all the way after you finish the implementation. You need a group of people who continuously work on this, depending on the goals that you have. Again, some of the vendors are listed below. Some of them are pure CDP. So it kind of helps you deal with other customer data as well in order to personalize the right way. But we wanted to list a few for you to see the option. When it comes to digital asset management, we found most of the cases that we deal with, they already have one in play, Widen being one of them. I forgot to put that on the slide. But we typically end up saying, oh, you already have something, and we look for capabilities, right? So what we're looking for, especially calling out Cloudinary and Binder on this slide, they have a really good image API. What I mean by that is it gives your designers, your UX people, your front-end developers, the ability to manipulate images on the fly dynamically without having to do anything beforehand. So if you wanted to bring an image and have a focal point of a location or a person on that particular image, you could do that over the wire dynamically at that moment in time. So digital asset management systems have come a long, long way. These are the four we wanted to call out, but again, really good for you to move away from a traditional DXP where all the assets are stored inside and it doesn't have the speed or the breadth to give these assets out to the customers. One of the other things we get asked about is also the email marketing. Again, it pretty much depends really. If you already have a CRM in the previous slides, like a Marketo or Zoho Social, things like that, they typically provide you the ability to not only have forms, but also have the ability for you to send emails to your target audience, depending on how you segment them in the background. These are some of the ones which we wanted to call out: Constant Contact, MailChimp, and so on. But typically what we find is the organization's already using something for this. You just have to figure out, does that fit our needs right now and in the future? And if it does, we can absolutely reuse it. If it doesn't, then we can try to find a solution. Last but not the least, that's a breathful, is commerce. Most of the customers we deal with have a commerce element to it. Doesn't necessarily have to have a dollar or a credit card component or a money transaction component, but whether it's B2B, B2C, There is some commerce element to it. Commerce systems have come a long, long way in making things super easy. Some of these other names you would easily recognize, but it's become almost like a headless CMS, as headless commerce systems for you to consume and add functionality really easily. And they provide different functionalities. Again, you have to look at it from what fits your needs rather than the other way around.
Yeah, monolith commerce is probably the worst thing I've ever worked on. But yeah, these headless commerce systems are so much nicer and so much easier, and just get with the philosophy of open APIs and open systems. So just in terms of the migration, planning the migration is a project in itself. So do better that in mind, and just continuously iterate as you go along. These projects are big. You're not usually, the implementation, the phases of those usually are quite big. You're not just moving from system A to system B. There is usually some transformations and business processes that are changing along the way. So just bear that in mind, and just plan your execution as well as you can, and just continue to iterate as you go along. So in summary, it's important to find your stack, figure out what's going to work for you and your business, and don't just go by charts and graphs. A lot of our customers we found have been doing this all along anyway. They already have systems and some processes in place. They're just not well integrated and not well connected. Focus on the client and the project needs specifically. Remember, you're trying to solve actual business needs and business requirements, and not just buy an off-the-shelf product to try and solve it for you. And we are available to help. We've done this for a number of years. We've done this for a lot of projects. Even if you just want an ear to sound off at and get a bit of advice, yeah, do get in touch. We're happy to help.
Questions? You could either type it in chat if you don't want to speak up, or you could ask. We're more than happy to answer any questions you guys have now, or you could definitely reach out to us after as well. Going once.
I can always ask one if no one's going to.
Sure.
When we're talking about enterprise customers who, if they were on a legacy monolith system, it's like an aircraft carrier, and it probably feels completely overwhelming to move that even a little bit. Like, what do you do when you think of even commerce or content management, when there's that much content or that many products, where it's not like 20 products, it's potentially hundreds of thousands? Does that not matter as much? Is it more about the connections to surface those, or how do you handle that? Really good.
So like, we have this one implementation where it's millions, right? And it all depends on how you plan for it. You would have to look at it from the perspective of, when you have so many products that you need to scale, then you architect it a little bit differently than you would if you had 60,000 products as opposed to 2 million products, right? So I think it's more of figuring out. That's why the road mapping is super important, because you kind of understand those challenges ahead of time, that, oh my gosh, like now we have to serve 2 million products or 5 million products. And how do we do that in terms of making sure it's fast and it's seamless? It would be a different architecture, as opposed to if the focus is more on, well, we don't have that many products. The focus is more on trying to find customer journeys, which are a little bit different, than you plan it accordingly. But the amount of data really doesn't matter, to be quite honest. We've dealt with tiny sites, we've dealt with sites with millions of products, and it's just the way you store it. These systems are so capable nowadays that they can scale pretty well. So as long as there's no hard and core budgetary requirements, and your sane in terms of understanding, I'm asking for 50 pounds and I get 50 pounds of apples and I'm willing to pay for 50 pounds of apples, then you're good.
Yeah, and then part of it also, I think, will also depend on how, like you talked about these monolithic systems. So if you're dealing with like commerce products, there may already be a system in the organization that has those 2 million products in it. And then what you've had to do traditionally is, I've got these 2 million products, but to surface that on the website, what I need to do is go to that system, import that into my monolithic system, and then my website visitors can see those products and buy those products. So with the Composable, you're saying, well, I already have it in the system. Why do I need to now bring it into my website? Why can I not just take it from that system? So there may be some things there where the monolith is actually not the best, doing the best thing that it can. But it just in terms of migration, like it will obviously depend on what monolithic system you're using, which one are you going to, is there something that can actually help you go along that journey to go from system A to system B, because it's in the same ecosystem, maybe from the same vendor. If there isn't, then maybe there's other steps you can do. Maybe actually your CMS is fine, but the problem is the commerce aspect of it. So you know what, I'm going to just actually use the CMS as a CMS and just keep that on-prem. And what I actually need is the commerce to scale. So I'm going to move my commerce part to a composable headless system, because that's the piece that actually needs to scale. The content is just a very small detail for us at this moment in time. So there's no reason you couldn't keep your CMS and keep that content and data where it is and just move parts of the other system. It's totally flexible, right? Just because it's composable doesn't mean everything has to go in the cloud and headless.
Great. And again, I've been to a lot of conferences in the last 2 weeks for Composable. One thing that comes up a lot is, how do you explain this to C-level decision makers who aren't that deep into technology, and also you get a very small amount of time with them to make the case?
How do you explain Composable to C-level people?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's several analogies, right? Cord cutting and God knows what, but you could use analogies, right? But the best way to describe it, and that's what we told a couple of these boards that we talked to, is it actually helps you streamline your business process. We use what we already have and remove duplication and find what we need when we need it, not all at once, all in one, all at once kind of thing. So it does take a little bit of education, and that was one of the slides, is it isn't something you're going to be done in 5 minutes and they get it. Composable is something new for them to understand, because some of these companies have been using these traditional DXPs, older systems for so long that this is a concept you do have to explain. And the best is proof is in the pudding kind of thing. Once you kind of do it, they quickly see the benefit of it, and they want to add more and more services on top of it.
What's your favorite analogy, Matt? I know you love your analogies.
Uh-oh, do we have enough time?
Yeah, I got
Two more
two
minutes.
Yeah. No, I love, I think cord cutting is really, I do like the cord cutting a lot, because you really have to explain it in ways that we all live within, because oftentimes the technology explanations can get very deep very quickly and complex. And I just think that that's a good way to go. I think the idea that we're composable-ish already, it kind of has the foot in the door on the processes. If you're an enterprise, you have a lot of systems already. And we always like to say, you don't have to go from all in one to all at once. So like has been said a bunch of times here, you can start with one property, you can start with one commerce instance, with one CMS campaign site, see how it works, and then build on that, because the costs are a bit better as well.
question coming from Jake. For e-commerce customers, what product information, if any, do you typically end up syncing into the CMS from the PIM or the e-commerce solution?
Yeah, so probably none into the CMS. So what we typically do is the PIM needs to feed something. If you have e-commerce in between, great. If you don't, and if you just have a PIM and a CMS. So most of these sites, if they're a brochure where it would just be a PIM and a CMS, there won't be any e-commerce. In which case, your e-commerce system needs things like a product selector, right? So if you're having a landing page, you want to be able to say, okay, I want a feature products list of 5 products, and you just need to be able to search for those products from your PIM system. So it would just be something like a custom element in your CMS where you're building the page. You just say, I want this component, I want these 5 products. That's pretty much the most. You don't want to duplicate the data. That's the whole goal of all of this. When it comes to if you do have an e-commerce system, your PIM syncs with your e-commerce in terms of the main identifiers, which is the SKU. But then in that case, if you have an e-commerce, that means you need pricing. And pricing would probably have to come from an ERP system based on tiered pricing, account-based pricing. So your e-commerce would have the bare minimums in terms of identifying a product and any product marketing information on top of it, as well as pull data from an ERP or wherever you store pricing, which comes into the e-commerce, and then the e-commerce and CMS together would hydrate your site. So it typically, that's what we see in terms of what we implement. And we try not to duplicate data as much as possible in terms of, if you have a product title and product description, you're not going to pull that into an e-commerce system and then pull that into the CMS system and then show it on the website. But if you have information that you want to add on top, absolutely, those would be things inside of the appropriate system, typically the e-commerce system or the CMS, depending on if you have an e-commerce or not. I hope that answered you, Jake. All right.
I think we're at time.
Yes. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I hope this was useful. And like Matt said, there will be an on-demand video of this webinar available. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.